Hey there, Molly. Mind if I call you Molly? Dr. Victoria inquired, then plowed ahead without pause. So, Molly, what exactly are you looking to achieve from our sessions together? Having gleaned an overview of the Powells' marital dynamics from their initial video consultation, Dr. Victoria aimed to have Molly articulate her own aspirations and objectives. Ensuring alignment among all involved parties stood as a crucial foundational step in their journey through marriage counseling. Today marked Dr. Victoria's inaugural session with the Powells, Molly, and Michael. While she conversed with Molly via Zoom previously, meeting Michael face-to-face was a first. Michael Powell appeared of average stature, boasting a lean physique reminiscent of a runner rather than a gem enthusiast. His clean-shaven face was framed by thick blonde hair, gently cascading to collar length. Molly Powell stood a tad shorter in stature. Like her husband, she sported blonde locks, currently fashioned into a ponytail trailing between her shoulder blades. Her ensemble, a black pencil skirt paired with heeled shoes, accentuated her medium-sized breasts and showcased her stunning tanned legs. Those legs, clearly sculpted by athleticism, boasted muscular calves subtly accentuated by the height of her heels. Since I returned to work 6 months ago, my husband's behavior has taken a turn for the worse. He's become increasingly controlling and emotionally abusive, constantly breaching my privacy rights, Molly revealed, her voice tinged with frustration. After taking a few years off to be a stay-at-home mom, I decided to re-enter the workforce now that our girls are in school. But Michael's jealousy has spiraled out of control, and his manipulative behavior has become unbearable. In marriage counseling, my aim is to reassure Michael of his unfounded fears and to put an end to his controlling tendencies. Victoria observed Michael's reaction closely as his wife recounted their marital woes. His expression remained impassive, almost detached, fueling Victoria's suspicion of his controlling nature. "Thank you for sharing, Molly," Victoria acknowledged, then turned her attention to Michael. "Now, Michael, let's delve into your perspective. What do you perceive as the primary issue in your marriage?" Michael met Victoria's gaze before shifting his eyes to his wife. Speaking with a flat, emotionless tone, he asserted, "My wife is emotionally involved with her supervisor. I demand she quits her job and cuts off all contact with him." Molly's response was a roll of her eyes, accompanied by a visceral display of disgust. "See what I deal with every day," she interjected, her voice laced with a mix of anger and exasperation. "This nonsense, day in and day out. I'm sick of it." Victoria turned her attention squarely to Michael, her expression conveying both firmness and a willingness to address his concerns head-on. "That's a serious accusation, Michael. Before we delve into that, I have a couple of questions for you. Why do you classify Molly's relationship with her supervisor as an affair, and what evidence do you have to support this claim?" Michael settled back into his chair, his gaze shifting between his wife and the counselor. "I'll address your questions, but first, I'd like to pose a couple of my own. Molly chose to consult with you, but I never had the opportunity to speak with you directly." Victoria met his inquiry with a measured look. "You're welcome to ask a couple of questions. However, if I deem them inappropriate, I reserve the right not to answer." "Fair enough," Michael agreed, locking eyes with Victoria. "Are you currently married?" "No, I'm not," Victoria replied, though she felt a twinge of discomfort discussing her personal life. Nonetheless, she understood the importance of transparency in her role as a counselor. "Have you ever been married?" Michael pressed further. Victoria hesitated briefly, aware of the delicate balance between openness and maintaining professional boundaries. "Yes, I have been married. However, I've been divorced for several years now," she disclosed, her unease growing with each question. "Why did your marriage end?" Michael probed, crossing a line that Victoria found deeply inappropriate. Before Victoria could respond, Michael continued with another invasive question. "Was infidelity involved?" Victoria felt her patience wearing thin. "The details of my personal life are not relevant to the issues in your marriage. We need to focus on your relationship and how to move forward," she asserted, struggling to maintain her composure. "I'll take that as a yes," Michael concluded, seemingly unfazed by Victoria's boundary setting. "Yes, there was infidelity involved. Victoria admitted, her lips pressed into a firm line, betraying her inner turmoil. "Thank you for your honesty," Michael acknowledged. "I believe this constitutes an emotional affair because not only do they interact extensively during work hours, but they're also in constant communication outside of work, even during evenings and weekends. Whenever we're out, Molly's glued to her phone, texting her boss. She refuses to let me see her messages, hides her phone from me, even sleeps with it under her pillow, and takes it to the bathroom. It's been 3 months since we've been intimate, and if she's not already sleeping with him, I fear it's only a matter of time." Victoria turned her attention to Molly, sensing a significant shift from their previous conversation over Zoom. "Molly, is Michael's account accurate?" Molly's expression twisted into a mix of anger and disgust. "Absolutely not. I text plenty of people, family, friends. Michael's just being paranoid, trying to control me and isolate me from everyone." "Michael, do you have any evidence to support your claims?" Victoria inquired, seeking clarification. Michael reached into his backpack, retrieving a stack of papers, which he handed to Victoria. "This is our phone bill from 4 months ago. Molly's cell phone details are on pages 4 and 5. Feel free to count them. She sent just over 300 texts that month, mostly to me, her sisters, and her mom." Molly couldn't contain her frustration any longer. "What's your point, Michael?" "You're only proving how baseless your accusations are," she retorted, her patience wearing thin. "What am I looking at?" Victoria inquired, accepting the stack of papers from Michael. "That's our phone bill from 4 months ago," Michael explained. "Molly's cell phone details start on page 4 and end on page 5. You can count them if you'd like, but she sent just over 300 texts that month, mostly to me, her sisters, and her mom." Molly couldn't contain her frustration. "What are you doing, Michael?" "You're only proving my point," she interjected, her patience waning with each passing moment. Undeterred, Michael reached into his backpack once more, retrieving another document, noticeably thicker than the previous one. "This is our phone bill from last month," he stated, handing the pages to Victoria. "Molly's cell phone details start on page 4, just like before. Take a look and tell me where it ends." Victoria scanned through the pages, her surprise evident. It ends on page 12. There are 7 more pages of texts compared to the previous bill. "Exactly," Michael affirmed. "Now, pay attention to the phone numbers." "It's almost exclusively one number," Victoria observed. "There are thousands of texts to the same number." Turning towards Molly, she prompted, "Molly?" "I text my boss." "Okay. So what? We have a great rapport, but that doesn't mean I'm cheating on you," Molly exclaimed, her frustration boiling over. Victoria glanced between the two, noting the stark contrast in their demeanors. While Molly was visibly agitated, Michael remained eerily calm and composed. "Prove it," Michael challenged, his statement hanging heavy in the air. Both Molly and Victoria were taken aback by his demand. It wasn't Molly's responsibility to prove her innocence. The burden lay squarely on Michael's shoulders to substantiate his accusations. "How can I prove a negative?" Molly retorted, frustration evident in her voice. "You can't expect me to prove something that isn't happening. It's as absurd as your belief that I'm having an affair." "I'll be satisfied if you let me read your texts," Michael insisted, extending his hand. "That's all it takes." Molly turned to Victoria, a mixture of exasperation and disbelief evident on her face. "Can you believe this? This is exactly what I meant about having no privacy," she vented, rolling her eyes at Michael. "Fine, you want to read my texts." With a resigned sigh, she retrieved her iPhone from her purse and unlocked the screen. "Here. Afterward, I expect an apology and for this absurd topic to be dropped." Michael reached into his backpack, producing a laptop and a cable. With swift movements, he connected Molly's iPhone to the laptop, explaining his intentions. Molly's panic was palpable as she watched him navigate the device. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice tinged with fear. "I've installed recovery software for iPhones," Michael explained calmly. "This will retrieve all deleted texts, photos, and videos." He tapped a few keys on the laptop, his gaze fixed on the screen. "No," Molly's scream pierced the air as she lunged for her phone, snatching it away from Michael along with the sync cable. Victoria was taken aback by Molly's sudden outburst, while Michael seemed unfazed, almost expecting it. "Molly," Victoria interjected gently, "this doesn't look good. It gives the impression that you're hiding something." "I have a right to privacy," Molly asserted, her gaze fixed on Michael. "I'm your wife. You have to trust me." Victoria nodded in agreement, directing her attention to Michael. "She's absolutely right. Trust is fundamental in a marriage. Everyone deserves their privacy." Michael shifted his focus between Victoria and Molly before addressing them. "Do you know the difference between privacy and secrecy?" Molly's response carried a hint of aggression. "Why don't you enlighten us, Michael?" Michael began to delineate the distinction. "Privacy is a fundamental aspect of marriage. Want to use the bathroom behind a closed door? That's privacy. Keep a diary or journal? That's privacy too. Privacy is neutral. It neither helps nor harms the marriage." "But secrecy is a different story," he continued. "When you engage in relationships or conversations with others, excluding your spouse, that's secrecy. It's detrimental to the marriage. You know those texts you're exchanging with your boss? Keeping them from me, it's secrecy. And you know they'll hurt our marriage. That's why you won't let me see them. Because deep down, you know if I do, it'll end in divorce." Tears streamed down Molly's face as she spoke, her voice choked with emotion. "That's not true. While some of our texts may have crossed a line, I haven't cheated on you. I wouldn't ever do that," she pleaded, her sobs growing softer. Victoria turned to Michael, seeking clarity. "Where does this leave us, Michael? Your initial counseling goals seemed rigid, leaving little room for compromise. Are you considering forbidding Molly from working?" Michael shook his head in response. "You mean impose rules? She's an adult." Just as he had queried about privacy and secrecy, Michael posed another question to the counselor. "Do you understand the difference between rules and boundaries?" Victoria nodded, inviting Michael to elaborate on his thoughts. "Rules dictate what others must do or can't do," Michael explained. "But you can't impose rules on adults. Instead, you can establish boundaries for yourself and outline consequences when those boundaries are crossed. For instance, I feel uncomfortable when you do this. If you persist, there will be consequences. Boundaries are about self-protection." "What does that mean, Michael?" Molly's tears had subsided, but her face remained damp with emotion. "It means what I said before," Michael reiterated. "Your job and relationship with your supervisor make me feel unsafe and uncomfortable in our marriage. If that feeling persists, there will be consequences." Molly and Victoria exchanged glances before turning back to Michael. "You can't force me to quit my job," Molly asserted firmly. "I wouldn't even attempt to," Michael assured her. "That would be imposing a rule. I'm not interested in making rules for you." "If I continue, you mentioned there'd be consequences," Molly said. "Indeed," Michael acknowledged. "Isn't that essentially making a rule? You're imposing a decision you've made onto me," Molly exclaimed, exasperated. "I don't perceive it that way. You have a choice. Either persist in actions that make me feel unsafe and uncomfortable, or cease those actions to ensure my safety and comfort. The decision is entirely yours." "What are these consequences?" Victoria inquired. "Pardon," Michael replied, puzzled. "You set your boundaries and warned of consequences for breaching them. It's fair for Molly to be informed about those consequences," Victoria reasoned. "Why?" "So she can weigh the pros and cons of crossing my boundaries. So she can calculate if it's worth it." Michael shook his head. "That's not how this works. She just needs to understand that consequences will follow. And even if she knew the consequences beforehand, do you honestly believe that would deter her?" "Yes, they would," Molly asserted, her tears dried and her expression resolute. "What's the most severe legal penalty for a crime?" Michael queried. "The death penalty, but I doubt you can execute me for crossing a so-called boundary," Molly chuckled nervously. Michael managed a grim smile. "I wouldn't even if it were warranted, but you're correct about the death penalty. Despite its severity, people still commit crimes. Knowing the consequences doesn't always deter them. They just become more adept at concealing their actions. So no, I won't disclose the consequences of crossing my boundaries. That's all the time we have for today, Victoria announced, attempting to conclude the session on a positive note. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. I feel optimistic about the progress we've made today, she added, although she couldn't gauge Michael's true sentiments. Molly rose from her seat, smiling at her husband, but Michael's expression remained solemn as he shook his head sadly. 2 weeks ago, you missed a really productive session, Victoria remarked. Molly mentioned you had to suddenly leave town for business. I assured her it was a fruitful meeting, Molly added. I feel much more optimistic about our marriage moving forward. Michael appeared notably more at ease this session compared to the last one, where he seemed despondent. Today, he was almost cheerful. Victoria anticipated a positive session ahead. Molly initiated the discussion. One topic Dr. Victoria and I covered was transparency and its significance in marriage. She slid her cell phone toward Michael. Feel free to go through it and recover my texts. Thank you, Molly, Michael replied with a grin. That won't be necessary. I'm fairly certain you've already done a factory reset on your phone by now. You seem much happier than you did at our last session, Victoria observed. The way it ended left me quite concerned for you. Michael waved off her concerns. I'm in a much better place mentally now. Since returning from his business trip, he's been noticeably more relaxed and happier, Molly chimed in. I think the trip did us both good, she added cheerfully. You both seem much happier today. I don't recall either of you smiling during our last session together, Victoria remarked. Isn't her smile just beautiful? Michael remarked, his eyes glinting with admiration. It's like a ray of sunshine in here. Victoria glanced at Molly, her grin indeed illuminating the room. Michael's praise was evidenced by Molly's radiant expression. I've always loved seeing her smile, Michael continued fondly. I've got countless pictures of her on my phone, each one capturing her happiness. Let me show you my favorite one. It's Molly at her absolute happiest. With that, Michael retrieved his phone, displaying the cherished image for Victoria and Molly to see. Molly's smile was infectious, her eyes reflecting pure joy and contentment. Glancing up at Molly, Michael reminisced, Remember this moment, Han. You were beaming. I'm not sure where that was taken exactly, Molly replied, gesturing to shrink the image. Could you zoom out? Of course, Michael obliged, adjusting the image as Molly and Victoria watched. As Molly became smaller, the surroundings became clearer. It revealed Molly standing in front of a door, with an arm reaching for the knob behind her. As the image continued to shrink, the figure behind Molly became discernible. Babe, let me explain. Molly's voice faltered, her sobs escalating into hyperventilation as realization dawned. Michael remained focused on his phone screen, disregarding Molly's cries. It was evident from the image that Molly was leaving a motel room with another man. Molly's wails grew louder. Her supervisor, Victoria asked, her voice heavy with sadness. You guessed it, Michael confirmed. And take a look at the timestamp. 4 hours after her session with you. With a flick of his finger, Michael displayed another photo of Molly entering the motel room, this time with a timestamp less than an hour after her session ended. See that? Michael pointed out. Right after your session, she's in a motel room with the person she claimed she'd never cheat on me with. Great job with the marriage counseling. I doubt you'll get credit for this save. Molly's cries intensified. I'm so sorry, baby. We can work through this. It meant nothing. I'll resign from my job. We can focus on repairing our marriage. Michael shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. You wanted to know the consequences. Here they are. I'm filing for divorce. That's a given. And I've changed my mind about you quitting your job. You'll need the income. He handed Molly a business card. Here's my attorney's contact information. Find yourself a lawyer and provide him with my attorney's details. Before coming here, I had all your belongings packed up and dropped off at your parents' house. They are not happy with you, but they've agreed to let you stay with them. The house was mine before we were married, so it won't be part of the settlement. And I don't want you there. After today, I never want to see you again. Molly spiraled into a full-blown meltdown as Michael stood and made his way to the door. Victoria appeared stunned. "Are you going to do anything about your wife?" she asked. Michael shook his head. "You mean my soon-to-be ex-wife? No, she's your problem now. You had the opportunity to hold her accountable, and you didn't. You made such a great impression on her last session that she immediately went out and cheated on me after leaving you. By the way, I found out that when you said your marriage ended due to infidelity, it was actually your infidelity, not your husband's. That makes me question if marriage counseling is the right fit for you." With that, Michael walked to the office exit. He glanced down at Molly, who sat on the floor, hugging herself and repeating, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry." Shaking his head at the sorry scene, Michael left through the door. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked it, please like it and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.